Welcome back, NFL fans. Ever wonder what it really takes to put together a fantasy football column each week? Well, it's more than just rankings and stats. It's a battle of distractions, tight deadlines, and sometimes even hurricanes. Today, we're diving into my weekly process and how I navigate the chaos to deliver top picks and key insights. Even when real-life disasters make fantasy football seem, well, pretty trivial. So, grab a seat because it's time to break down who to love, who to avoid, and how to keep your fantasy team rolling through week 6. Each week, as you might expect, I divide this column into 2 parts, a process that usually takes me 2 days. On Tuesdays, I focus on researching, ranking, and determining who belongs on which list. Wednesdays are set aside for writing, where I handle both the opening story and the player breakdowns. These are often written separately. The order depends on the week. If I have a great opening story in mind, I'll dive into that first. If I'm unsure or have just a rough idea, I start with the player write-ups, weaving in general references to the theme I plan to explore. I've discussed the process of writing the opening before, including last year on NBCSports.com, so I won't dwell on it here. Except to reiterate what you've likely heard, it's time-consuming and by far the hardest and most demanding part of my weekly job. It takes so long partly because I obsess over every word, phrase, joke, and most importantly, the structure. Yes, the structure. It's the most critical part of writing, and anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't fully understand. Along with that, I struggle with focus. I'll write a paragraph, then get distracted by Twitter, X, or Instagram, browse through one of my 25 fantasy teams looking for trade opportunities or waiver pickups, check emails, or reply to endless texts. Basically, I'll do anything other than writing the column. Eventually, though, a good idea strikes and I get down to business. Somehow, by Thursday morning, 5,000 words are ready. Distraction is usually part of my process, and I even enjoy it. This week, I tried to distract myself by watching the Mets game, a nod to my fantasy football happy hour co-hosts Connor Rogers and Jay Croucher, along with backup producer Pete Damilatis and the boss, Matt Casey. I also distracted myself by participating in 2 Guillotine League drafts. Guillotine Leagues can start at any time, as long as you have one more team than weeks left in the season. So, I did a 12-team draft and an 11-team one. Lastly, I tried to get my mind off things by watching my twin daughters play junior high field hockey. They suffered a tough 3-0 loss. And none of those distractions worked. Despite my efforts to avoid it, I kept coming back to 2 things. My lack of inspiration for the column's opening this week and the endless coverage of Hurricane Milton. It feels similar to the coverage of Hurricane Helene, just with updated graphics. Like the rest of the country, I've been glued to the screen, captivated by both the tragic devastation caused by Helene and the uncertainty of Milton. Will it be as bad, or even worse? Once again, we're witnessing life-threatening situations as some people struggle to escape the elements, while others remain trapped in their homes. Unable to reach safety, and worse, rescue efforts can't reach them either. I see destroyed homes, flooded streets, stadium roofs torn off by the wind, and cars completely submerged. It feels like a real-life apocalyptic movie. Social media is filled with pleas for help, alongside calls to stop misinformation. A quick scroll through Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok reveals real images of the destruction left by Hurricane Helene, and rising fears about what Hurricane Milton will bring. Beyond the general concern we all feel, I have an extra layer of worry. My wife and I have family and close friends in the FT, Myers, Naples, Bonita Springs area. We visit multiple times a year and love it there. Southwest Florida holds special meaning for us. It's where we took our first vacation together while dating, got engaged, and plan to retire. So, seeing this devastation is deeply personal. Let me clarify what matters most is that everyone stays safe. Material possessions, even homes, can be replaced. I'm not downplaying the fact that the greatest tragedy is the loss of life. But some people have lost their homes. Again, I wrote nearly the same thing back in September 2022 when Hurricane Ian hit. Tonight, I've been in constant communication with my wife, friends, and family down there. It feels like I'm on 1,000 different text threads, with everyone checking in, asking questions, and piecing together bits of information from online, sharing screenshots and links. Someone says, "Look at this." Another replies, "Wait, isn't that from Ian?" Someone else insists it's Helene. No, the poster claims it's a current image from Milton. It's terrifying, and the uncertainty makes it even worse. We also have friends planning to move there. Even before all this, pandemic-related shortages and high demand had caused a 2 to 3 year wait to build homes. And now, people haven't even recovered from Ian, and it will take years for places like North Carolina and others hit by Helene to rebuild. Years, maybe even decades, I don't know. I just know this is awful, frightening, and the unknown only adds to the nightmare. So that's how I spent my Wednesday night thinking, calling, worrying, texting, researching, trying to help, and not writing. My thoughts are with everyone in Florida and anyone else impacted or about to be affected by hurricanes Helene or Milton. The situation is intense, and fantasy football feels more trivial than ever in light of everything going on. But this is the job, and I'm here to help. So I've tried to lighten up the player analysis with some humor to avoid making this column too heavy. You get it. A quick thanks to my producer, Damian Dabrowski, for his assistance on various parts of this column. Now, let's dive in. Quarterbacks I love in Week 6. Kirk Cousins at Carolina. Fresh off a 509-yard, 4-touchdown game where he scored 34.4 fantasy points. Kirk Cousins is on fire. Sorry for the strong language, Kirk. There's good reason to believe he'll continue that momentum against Carolina. The Panthers are giving up passing touchdowns at the second highest rate, allowing multiple TDs in every game so far, and rank 6th in fantasy points allowed to QBS, 18.6 PPG. With the Falcons having a top 5 implied team total this week, it's clear that the Panthers' defense isn't strong. Cousins is my QB3 this week. Joe Burrow at New York Giants. After the Bengals' Week 5 loss, Joe Burrow admitted, "We're not a championship-level team right now." While true for the Bengals, Burrow is still powering many fantasy teams with his QB4 ranking for the season in QB2 and PPG. 23.2 over the past 4 weeks. He's facing a Giants defense allowing the 6th highest passer rating and a 72% completion rate to opposing QBs, with Cincinnati ranking 3rd in pass rate over expectation. Expect Burrow to air it out. I rank him as QB5 this week. Dak Prescott versus Detroit. Dak Prescott has had a crazy week winning against the Steelers in the final seconds of Sunday Night Football, nearly punching a referee and tearing down his own house on Tuesday. Now he lands on my Week 6 love list. He'll have plenty of scoring opportunities against the Lions, with one of the highest game totals this week at 52.5. Detroit's strong rush defense, ranked 4th, contrasts with their 27th ranked pass defense, making this a great passing matchup. Prescott has averaged 24.1 PG since last season, making him a top 10 QB for Week 6. Others receiving votes. Cincinnati has given up the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks and is allowing touchdown passes at the 4th highest rate. So you could do worse than starting Daniel Jones, the unofficial QB, king of New York City, for Week 6. Quietly, Jones has thrown multiple touchdown passes and scored 8 or more fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. The Seahawks 49ers game has the 3rd highest projected total, 49, for Week 6. And the 49ers are giving up the 5th most yards per completion. So consider Geno Smith, who has scored over 17 fantasy points in 4 of his 5 games this season. British fans may welcome Caleb Williams warmly on Sunday, but Jacksonville's pass defense will likely be even friendlier. The Jaguars rank last in pass defense and have allowed the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Quarterbacks I hate in Week 6. Trevor Lawrence at Chicago, London. Trevor Lawrence has struggled in London, averaging just 13.7 PPG over his 4 career games there, without throwing multiple touchdown passes in any of them. Maybe the Jaguars forget their plug adapter when playing in the UK. Just a theory. Either way, he faces a tough challenge against a Bears defense that has given up the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks and has the lowest passer rating against. 4 of the 5 QBs who faced Chicago this season scored fewer than 7.0 fantasy points. I have Lawrence ranked at QB 19 this week, and there's a real chance he performs poorly. Let's hope Kirk Cousins isn't still reading. Aaron Rodgers versus Buffalo. Rodgers has scored under 12 fantasy points in 3 of his 5 games this season. Now he faces a Bills defense that allows the 3rd fewest yards per completion and has kept Kyler Murray, CJ Stroud, and Trevor Lawrence all under 16 fantasy points. Rodgers ranks QB 20 for me this week, and with the Jets having the 6th lowest implied team total, it might be time to hit the waiver wire and leave Rodgers behind, however painful that may be. Running backs I love in week 6. Breece Hall versus Buffalo. Breece Hall has managed just 27 rushing yards on 19 carries over the last 2 weeks. I'm not saying Robert Saleh should have been fired for that alone, but I do think he owes me money for every league where I drafted Hall. However, this could finally be the Breece Hall breakout game. Buffalo has allowed the most fantasy points to running backs this season, with at least 25 points given up to RBS in 4 of their 5 games. They also lead in receptions and receiving yards allowed to running backs. 7 running backs have had 10 or more touches against the Bills, and 5 of them have scored touchdowns. I have Hall as my RB5 this week. Now, if only Robert Saleh would send me that Venmo payment. Tony Pollard versus Indianapolis. Tony Pollard has been consistently getting 18.5 touches per game this season and has maintained a double-digit target share in every game. That kind of volume is perfect for a matchup against a Colts defense that gives up the 4th most rushing yards to running backs. The Colts are also allowing 165 scrimmage yards per game to RBS. I have Pollard as a top 10 running back this week. As a Commanders fan, I'd like to thank Pollard for finding his form only after leaving Dallas. You're a class act, Tony. Josh Jacobs versus Arizona. Running backs who've had 15 or more touches against Arizona are averaging 17.3 PG, while Josh Jacobs is getting 19.6 touches per game. He may even see more action this week since teams average 26.2 RB carries per game against Arizona, the 4th highest in the league. Why do teams run so much? Oh, because the Cardinals have a poor run defense? Yes, exactly. They've given up the 2nd most rushing yards to RBs this season. Jacobs is also a top 10 back for me this week.